start the recorder. Now we'll start the meeting. It is June 24, 2023. We'll call to order the Lake Lemon Conservancy District Board of Directors meeting. We do have a quorum with only one member absent, so we will go ahead and start with that. Our next item will be public comments. Anyone that wishes to make comments to the board, we ask to stand up and talk as loud as you can so hopefully everyone can hear. We ask you to keep your comments to approximately 3 minutes, and we'll open up for public comments. Yes, ma'am.
Rebecca Ball, District 7. The last couple times I've listened to the video of the board meetings, and I can't understand. I miss most of the conversation and trying to hear what people are saying. I don't know if there's a better way to improve the sound. And I don't, if you aren't going to meetings and you're depending on that, you guys that go to the meetings and attend, I don't know if you've ever listened, trying to realize how hard it is to hear it.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We're sharing the technology with CVU and their board, but we will work with them because we certainly want you to be able to easily hear those meetings. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah.
You guys hear me as well?
I've listened to a couple, and I haven't had a problem, but they were old ones. Yeah.
I could hear that.
Some of the board members have listened to some of them, but obviously we're not necessarily checking some of the more recent ones, so we'll check into that. We want to make sure that the public can hear those meetings. Anyone else wishing to make comment? Yes, sir.
I'm Aaron McAlexander, District 1, or Sub-District 1. You all heard me talk before. I'm quite adamantly opposed to the 17.1 acre lake off of South Shore Drive being filled in. That's where I've been fishing for the better part of a decade. That's where I take my boy fishing, and I've always been opposed to it. I hate to see us lose a very valuable public resource. A couple other items along that line is it's slated to be filled in this year despite all the opposition, despite petitions against it being filled in over the years. What are you going to do with the dirt when you need to dredge again? You can't dump it back in on another wetland. They won't let you do that, so what resource are you going to take next? Where's the next step? This is a short-term plan. No answer. The other thing I'd like to ask about is...
I'll have Adam address
We
it.
are looking at being able to reuse the other upland site and our other upland properties that we're looking at for future disposal sites. This is a one-time shot disposal site, and that's why in the permitting the state wanted to plant and create a treatment of wetlands to create a habitat enhancement. So we do know that's a one-time shot. It also does not have the cost associated with creation of disposal sites, which is in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. So it's a very substantial area without that upfront cost, where we can create wetlands as well afterwards.
We're losing a 17-acre public body of water right now. I guarantee there's someone fishing on it right now.
I don't know. I came across there. I didn't see anybody. They were all on pipes here, but
Yes.
yeah.
You all see the kayaks out there?
Oh, yeah. I see them on the right corner.
Yep.
Yeah, we see them all.
So that's one of my questions. Next one I'm curious about is, everybody got a tax bill this year. It was quite a bit more than what you're expecting. How much is our tax bill going to be next year? Because I don't want to find out a month before that it's going to be double.
So we're in the process of preparing the budget. The next board meeting, next several board meetings, it'll be presented. There's a strong commitment to ensure that the taxes don't go up next year, at least the total budget amount that we're budgeting. Now, if your assessed value goes up, it can fluctuate a little bit, but it won't be anything like this last year.
So you're asking for the same amount again next year?
We haven't discerned it. It won't, we are committed to ensuring it doesn't go up, but we are currently assessing what we're
I
going to
think
project.
it doesn't go up
Can we
from
go-
what it is now.
Right, correct. Yeah.
I think
We get
that's
a
the
letter from
question.
them, Because, we were quite surprised by that number, even though it's embedded about 13 minutes in on a YouTube video that had nothing to do with the taxing portion. But I got a personal letter about a sublease for a dock. Why can't I get one for how much I should prepare for on taxes?
You might want to go over the whole
That's
process of
Yeah.
the meetings we had and the public hearings and
So
the
we-
number of times we
The
discussed
budget
it.
was presented at least at 3 meetings. We had the official hearing. It was ultimately adopted. We're following state law. We don't have the means to tell you exactly what your tax bill is going to be. That's based on your assessed valuation and calculated by either Monroe or
You can
Brown
send me a
County.
letter that says a percentage.
Yeah.
We don't know the percentage. The percentage fluctuates because as a conservancy district, and you can probably explain it better than I, we just ask for a set dollar amount. And then that all kind of factors in. So quite often, the percentage goes down.
Yeah, if we keep the tax rates the same and the assessed values go up, that percentage goes down. So we ask for a specific dollar amount. The Department of Local Government Finance looks at the total assessed value of the district, and then they set the rate to get that amount as closest to it.
Who's they?
The Department of Local Government Finance.
Department of Local
So
Government
Monroe County
Finance.
and Brown County,
This is state level.
state.
Last question. How much was collected in taxes this past year?
This current year or last year?
Or this last pay period? May, or yeah. Or what are you anticipating to collect for 2023 for 2022 assessments?
I want to say the entire amount was $850,000.
That's my recollection. I think it's 847.
How many residents are on the lake?
520, a little more than that.
Okay. So, all right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Following that, I want to, could you explain the pond? Because I've heard, my recollection is that a third of it's going to be filled in and the rest of it's not going to be filled in, but that's what I thought. The other thing is, I want to say, you could post, my understanding from going to meetings is that for 2 years, probably our lake tax would be double to help pay for this thing, for the dump site. Anyway, well, you could always mention it in the, and maybe you have in the newsletter, and people, if they want to know, could look at the newsletter. Jessica's really good with that. It's a good way to communicate, and everybody that wants to know about the lake should be getting the newsletter, and that way it doesn't cost us money by sending everybody letters. But could you explain the ponds?
Yeah, so the permitting on the pond allows us to fill essentially the 6 inches below the water column, the water depth to create an emergent wetland and then plant it with vegetation after that. After you plant it, there's requirements for a monitoring period. It's 3 years that we're required to monitor it, and if they decide that it's a success, then it continues to go, and we can stop the monitoring but continue the maintenance. If it hasn't deemed to be successful yet, it can go up to 5 years for the monitoring process. So the state will come in and make sure we have, certain percentages or not percentages of invasives, different types of vegetation that would be in there.
I thought there was a plan to fill in part of it and not the rest of it.
We have talked about starting on not the far west end, so if there is, east end. Now in case we don't get the whole thing filled, there would be deeper water towards that east end. But it's really going to depend on how much we get from the project for the total percentage that's going to
And
be.
the other thing you respond to what he said, from my understanding, is that once we get the other one filled up and the dirt dries out, we can sell that dirt. We have places to go with the dirt. I know, if nothing else, I have a place you can go with the dirt on my property nearby. So there is a place
Can
to
we
take the
then save
dirt.
the pond?
We're looking to get rid of dirt. It's going to be very expensive to get rid of that dirt.
How much dirt?
So we are looking at how to get rid of that dirt. We actually just had United Excavating to build the pond, came out and we're starting to get some brainstorming sessions about how to efficiently get rid of the dirt in that area. I mean, it's gonna be 100,000 yards, so that's what, 10,000 triaxles of dirt.
I got 70 acres of ravine.
And unfortunately, we can't fill in ravines. So ideally, we're gonna be looking for like, we can find some of these large agricultural fields in the vicinity. That would be the cheapest way to get rid of that, is we can find large fields, farmers go in, spread it out. So we have to haul it very far, like to go to quarries and stuff, and that exponentially increases the pricing.
But the overflow pond actually has more capacity, 50% more than what the thing we built does.
Well, we can
Takes
reuse the
150,000
current
cubic
man-made
yards.
pond, or the sediment pond. You can't reuse a wetland once you fill it, or once you convert it.
To answer your question, Gil?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Julia Van over there in District 7. How full is the overflow pond? And are you anticipating, when are you anticipating using the overflow, or the dump site? How full is the dump site? When do you anticipate using the overflow?
So some of that's on the hydraulic dredging update, which we're going to do later on. Currently, the best estimate as of yesterday was 83,700 cubic yards have been removed and placed in that upland site. The capacity to the spill pipe is 120,000. That's not the functional capacity. What's ultimately going to decide when we switch over is when the water quality of the return water degrades to a point that's no longer acceptable. So as it fills up, there's less retention time and settling time, and a higher percentage of that sediment can make it back out into flow water. So I would anticipate getting towards 100,000 yards, and then it's going to be kind of a quick monitoring thing to see when we're going to switch over. And right now they're averaging 10,000 plus a month.
So does it fill up evenly, or is it like,
It pretty much tapers. The heaviest sediments fall out first. So I would say the first third. On the back of this, there's a picture. There's probably a third that's functionally full, and then it slowly tapers down. But as that fills up, it looks kind of like little streams that go across and then drop down. So it kind of moves forward like a snowdrift, I would say.
okay, so in response to the question about finding places to flow, farmers that need places to fill in. We had, when this all started, there were lots of people who came forward to say, hey, look at my land, look at my land. And we looked at every single property and then marked them off that they were too far away or whatever. But there were lots of.
We went pretty extensively through the properties. A lot of the proposed ones were in wetlands, below our high water marks, not large enough to create to put the money in to create a large full site. So we went through pretty exhaustively on the site.
Thank you.
Yeah, my committee in 2002 or something went door to door. We had a dredging.
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
Ron Thrasher, you told him earlier that you had alternative sites after this one.
I said we're looking.
Where are those sites?
We're looking at alternative sites. One of them is that North Shore property near Possum Trot, which has been in communication with the city of Bloomington about. That's probably the closest large field that could take a disposal site of the size that we have currently.
Earlier though, when we talked about this 5, 6, 7 years ago, you said that was off because of floodplain.
We've mapped that out actually. So we've done the mapping, we've had the utilities come out and mark out the utilities from Brown County. So there is a pretty large portion of that field that is out of the floodplain and that does not have utilities running through it.
And then Little Africa, that was talked about.
Little Africa, we had the wetland delineation done, and that was primarily wetland across Little Africa.
So it wasn't, because it's the existing wetlands and the type of wetlands it is, we cannot use it for a fill site.
Okay, so how did that get approved then for some of the septic things that people were talking about, but not a dump site? Little Africa.
What was that?
At one point, there was people working on the sewer things and stuff up there, and it was approved from the city of Bloomington for a site.
For the wastewater.
Yes.
So essentially with the little packaged wastewater plant, there is a small portion closest to the road that did not have hydrant wet soils. And the plant footprint was pretty small, so what they were really permitting wasn't filling up the area with dirt. Their permit said that they would allow the discharge from the small treatment plant there. And I want to say the footprint was pretty small on that plant that they proposed.
Okay, so bottom line, Little Africa is offsite, or is it?
Correct, yeah. Correct.
Lastly, the water coming out of the dump site, I know you did your little YouTube video and stuff, but we all know that this colored water has sediment in it. Anyone can drive down through there, and where that dumps into the bay on the east side of Little Africa is just, it's chocolate milk all the time. What is your plan and this board's plan for getting that back out? Because it may be minimal, but you are putting sediment back there. And it's gonna work its way to the creek channel. You can't just, again, you're taking mud from one area and telling all of us that this is okay, and you guys are just gonna have to suffer with it. Same thing with the people in the small pond. We're basically telling them, we're better than you guys, and your lake life don't mean anything because it's better to put it here.
So I'll get into that as well on the dredging update. We do monitor the outflow on that. So why it doesn't look crystal clear, I think it's pretty much like summer pond water. So we measure turbidity, which looks at the light penetration, then we measure total suspended solids. And then we measure total suspended solids, that actually looks at the amount of sediment that's still in there, and we're incredibly low on that. So that's what's gonna dictate when we switch over, is once we start seeing amount that's no longer acceptable, we're looking at like kind of wastewater treatment plant standards for the turbidity, we will go, or with total suspended solids, we will work with IDEM and DNR to say we can switch over. And that's what I was referring to as the functional capacity versus the physical as-built capacity. Is once that gets to a point like, all right, there's sediment that's no longer negligible, then we will switch over.
But you are admitting there is sediment coming in there.
I mean, there's stuff in there.
Okay.
I mean,
So what's acceptable to you and the freeholders right there that are going to lose water down?
so wastewater treatment plants with total suspended solids are around 20 milligrams per liter of material that's in it. Currently on our last measurement, we're like 0.06 milligrams per liter. So we're measuring that, and I mean, it's probably about not much different than what's in your tap water right now as far as sediment load. And then it's going to be pretty exponential once we get to that point where there's not enough settling time, then it will shoot up. And so before we hit that point is when we're going to switch over. And that's going to have to be in unison with the Department of Environmental Management and DNR.
I would not drink any tap water that looked like that. Just be right. That's it.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have one question on this. In my estimate, you're saying 10,000 a month of sediment. And if we're at 83,000, we only have like 2 months before you're gonna switch over,
Potentially, yes.
potentially. So that's when I leave Lakeland Conservancy, but, will you, does that mean, according to the DNR papers that we got, you have to drain, you still have to drain the pond fully? It
No.
says on that.
The water will be removed through displacement. So if we drained it, then you would potentially have a fish kill and that kind of stuff. What we do is we'll pump into it, and that sediment that goes into it will displace that water out through the outflow pipe. So it will not be drained down. That would not be good for any of the soil health or anything.
Okay. Then you talk about 6 inches below water line. And the water line is usually below the big 49-inch thing.
Correct.
So will it, where is that 6-inch line usually going to be?
So where the normal pool is right now, it'd be approximately 6 inches below that. So the amount of, the water level will stay the same.
Yes, ma'am.
Teresa Sims, I live on the overflow, pond, and I'm here to tell you that that disposal site is not beautiful. It's over in the far right corner from the road, and I've got a panoramic picture of it. You can see it's totally different than the picture that Adam has provided here. Over on the far end where they're pumping the water out, it's 14.5 feet deep. In the middle, it's 12.5 feet deep in the center of it. And then toward the land, it goes, or toward the, where they put the sediment, it kind of goes up 9 feet, 7 feet, 4 feet. It's a pretty steep decline. So there's a lot of space still left.
Can I ask when you took those measurements and how you took them?
Last week,
Can I ask, I've talked to you like twice about trespassing on the property.
yeah, well, arrest me.
Well, thank you for letting me know.
I want transparency and I'm not getting it, so arrest me.
How did you take the measurements, if I may ask?
And a kayak and a pole. And the pole had feet marked on it, and we know how deep it is. And it
Thank you
wasn't
very
just
much.
me, it's
Sediment.
my brother-in-law.
Yeah, I mean,
People that know. There's people that know.
So the way that I would interpret that is that was about 45 foot deep when we built it. So if we're like in the 10 to 15 range mark, we are substantially.
Yeah, but that is at least from the top, because you're negating about 10 feet from the top. The water level's is down. You're taking a lot of depth there off the table. In fact, the water level from where it was earlier is down at least 3 or 4 feet. If that could be filled up, that's a lot of area. That's here's a long way to go. I tell you what the best way to do, if you want to listen to me, wait till the simmer when you stop drinking. Let the water settle, let the sediment settle. Next March, or whenever you want to dredge again, it'll all be settled. So you can pump the water off the top. I'm not worried about pumping all that sediment out into the other side. Then you'll see what kind of crater is still left over there. That is transparency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I might add, maybe just to clarify, and you can correct me, but the way I understand it is the real way to tell if it's full, it's not a visual observation. It is the amount of sediment that comes out the other end. And the thing is, as it fills up, there's less time for the stuff to settle out. So when we first started, it had months and months to settle out, and therefore the effluent, the stuff was coming out the other end, it was acceptable. But as you take up the volume, well, you have less settlement time because there's less area in there for all the stuff to settle out. And therefore, once it starts to, get more full, we're going to start having more sediment going out the other end, which we obviously don't want to do because then that means we're putting it back in. And that's why we're doing it. So that's my understanding of it. So maybe that'll help clarify it. It's not a visual observation. It's a technical observation of the amount of sediment that is coming out the other end. And the reason it changes is because the volume decreases as it fills up. And that means less time for the stuff to settle. And we're going to get more stuff at some point, and then we'll have to shut it off. And there probably will be several feet of whatever, open water there when we get to that point.
That's absolutely correct. And visually, the water level fluctuates a lot in there. So when we're out there looking at it, you can see right now what looks like a little stream flowing across that until you get to deep water. And that's because it's going over, a couple inches of water. And then as that water level changes, you may see 4 or 5 acres there we can see sediment. And then if the water level comes up 1 foot, then you may see just a little spot. So we're going to dictate what the functional capacity is based on the water quality on return water, so we're not just moving dirt from one spot to another. And that will be in conjunction with the permitting and regulatory agencies. So we won't just pull that. We will go to DNR and IDEM and say, here's our data. Let's all get on the same page. That way we are good to go. And then if backyard scientists come out with different data, we are already on the same page and we have done everything by the book, so.
So Adam, I'm not advocating this, but I think you might speak to, I understand their concern. If we slow the pace of dropping stuff in, there's a negative financial ramification with the dredger. So one way to give yourself more time is not pump as much as quickly. The other thing I know we talked about was using chemicals to induce the soil to leave.
Correct.
Could you speak to either of those and how they're being considered and what pros and cons of
Oh,
that?
yeah. So the time frame aspect, if you were to pump a lot less material into the lake, there would be more settling time. It's the difference of putting a garden hose versus putting a 10-inch diesel-powered pump going into there. So if you have a smaller amount coming in, or you were to take big gaps in time, you could essentially pump up until you were before that spill level, wait a couple weeks for it to settle out, and then come back in. The issue is the contractors are still have to pay staff and take that time. So essentially a lot of money is going to go towards just sitting idle and waiting for that rather than pumping. The other options that they do have are what are called polymers, and they're used in wastewater treatment plants or flocculants that can you put into the water, inject it, and it helps attract all the sediment particles together and then settle out faster. So far, with the levels that we've seen on the return water, we haven't had to use the flocculant. In the contract itself, I think there's about $50,000 that are in the contract for flocculants and polymers if we decided to use those. If we don't need to use those ultimately, that money could be shifted to more sediment being removed from the lake. That'd be an additional $40,000 to $50,000. So that is an option. And once we kind of get to a level where we may have to use those, we would have to assess, how much volume's left in there versus the cost. So there are options that would go up cost ramifications.
Just real quick, don't they have can't they on the first pass on the real soft sediment, because there's 3 different types, okay? And the top layer is the real sandy, silky stuff. To slow down, and then the next one's, that's the heavier stuff. So, just the first layer, because they made, 3 passes in one area at basically 1.5 feet.
They would when they're further out towards the lake. It's a lot more compact as we move further east. So I want to say they're having to do, they're only going to cut 6 inches at a time or so, right along that creek there.
But that stuff doesn't move, it settles faster in the pond.
Correct. And the further east that we go, the larger the particles as well as uniformly in the delta. Yeah. So there are options to look at as far as slowing down. So far, we haven't hit, based on what we're measuring, we haven't had to hit a point that we've had to implement either brakes or the polymer.
But do they have the availability to just the first layer, the first cut,
Yeah.
6 inches, to slow the pump down?
Potentially, that'd be something I'd have to look into.
Is there, I'm trying to think of some way to stay for fun right now. Is there a way to extend this out? I know it all, you're dealing with a permit timeline. Permit's 200 months, and you've done the legwork already for it. Is there a way to fill the current disposal site, and then, like you said, move toward, hey, let's scoop it out, disperse that on where we can, and then come back at a later time and do some more dredging. And then, it's a longer term goal, but then we aren't devaluing someone that lives on that pond's property. We aren't taking away public fishing resource for people. The lake still looks the same. Honestly, probably is going to make doing road maintenance along South Shore Drive a lot easier too. I'm sure there's a whole lot of headaches involved when you have to do road maintenance next to a wetland. But how hard would it be to shift towards something like that, and that way we don't have to lose our South Shore pond?
I mean, it goes back to the timing thing. I mean, clearing out that disposal site is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, any way you look at it. So that's why we're kind of looking at,
That's how much it's gonna cost to turn that pond into a wetland. 100 feet is not gonna touch.
we've had close on that. I don't think so. And then, again, it comes back to, we do measure, and I know you're adamantly against the data that we have, but we do measure algae and everything in there as well. And then
I'm adamantly against where you were collecting your data.
That's fair enough. But I mean, that's one of the things too, and the state said, you know, they're battling blue-green algae everywhere. And if we have an opportunity to have a $140,000 disposal site and combat a major nursery of blue-green algae, I think overall for the water quality, it's a benefit. But I just would like to go back to when we initially passed our conceptual designs and had the board meeting, all these aspects were in that plan, including the entire use of the overflow pond, the fields, everything, and we had unanimous vote in agreement on the board of these designs. So that all kind of took place 4, 5, 6 years ago when we were designing this, and we had strategic public committees and engagement from the lake, and it was pretty exhaustive when we came up with the plan. So the plan is in place, and now the plan
So it does take a lot more.
to execute that.
That's my old CEO used to say, execute the play. The play's been called, execute it.
So yeah, and that's kind of where I come from, Joe. My job is that the board unanimously decided on these agreements. We're getting it done.
Okay, I think it's my turn. That is not entirely true. I have never been unanimously for filling the pond. I did agree, probably this year, when I saw that there were 6 members of the board that were for using the pond. So I think it was March of this year that I asked Adam and the board of the 80,000 cubic yard capacity of the pond to fill in 40,000 cubic yards, half. Provide a tributary curtain down the half of the pond so that we knew when that 40,000 cubic yards was in there, we still had 40,000 cubic yards of water. So I have been totally against filling in the pond ever since this was brought up from strategic planning. I'm still against filling in the pond. However, my vote doesn't count against the other 6 members of the board. So I had to find a compromise, if you will. And, you know, there are other areas that we can look at. Maybe Shuffle Creek. I don't think we've ever looked at Shuffle Creek. You know, there was the strategic planning committee that we had several years ago that was dissolved. We had a number of areas across the lake that we were looking at. And that's why we bought this property and used it as an upland site. So I want to go on record that, you know, I am not for filling in the pond. Never have been. The girls know that I have been adamantly against it. But, you know, sometimes you just got to, you know, take what you got. And this is kind of what we've got. I wish we could find another spot. And I wish, Adam, I wish you would clarify, number 2, that the dredge disposal area 2, which is the pond, is optional and only will be used if dredge disposal area 1 exceeds its filling capacity.
Yes.
And that's not what you said. So I'm guessing DNR, when they come out, you have them, this Marquita Shepherdson, when they come out, that they're going to say, yes, it's exceeded its filling capacity. And then number 2, it says area 2, which is the pond, will first be drained and then dredge material placed. Again, opposite of what you said. So, I mean, you said that the dredge material will displace the water, and that's not what the permit says. So I just think that maybe that needs to be clarified.
All right.
The other thing,
It's functional capacity, though. Like, we're never going to reach the
Not what it said, I'm just going by what.
Yeah, and we have been in discussion with DNR as well. So when I asked them about that language in the initial permitting, they go, it's boilerplate language. We understand that it's going to be, the water is going to be removed as dredge material is placed there.
And they probably should come up with an amendment of some type, maybe, so that people understand. You know, because I think we were under the impression that the pond, and I can tell you, Ron Thrasher will tell you, you'll never be able to drain that pond. I mean, it's impossible because of the pipes that run underneath the road. So, just a couple of points I wanted to bring up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think we need clarification on the capacity of the overflow pond.
It's close to 150,000 yards.
You said
Oh,
80 at the March meeting.
I said we had 80 left on this contract, I believe.
Yeah, but it is a capacity of 150 more than the basin that we built for
Yeah.
$500,000.
Okay, I'll have to go back and listen to the minutes.
Any additional members of the public wishing to make comment? Yes,
Any
sir.
update on the fingers, top fingers?
I've been on them last March. They sent it out to the city council. They, being the lady that I was working with, proposed that we would have to go to the city of Bloomington utilities to request that change. Wes was actually talking with me recently about how to progress that, and if we did want to have a vote saying the board is not against that, I don't know if you would want to propose that, Wes. And that way, we could just tell the city of Bloomington utilities once they have a moment to say, all right, we've already voted on that.
Yeah, well, at least we eliminate that part of the step. We don't have to wait back from them. So maybe later today, I can make that proposal in this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they did say though, the city of Bloomington utilities would have to propose that to the Bloomington City Council to change, since we're just a leasing and not a property owner. So I think once we have that vote, then we can go to the city of Bloomington utilities again and say, all right, we've actually voted at the Conservancy Land Board. We are making progress, but.
Okay, thank you.
Well, one more thing. So what Ross brought up at the last meeting about the sewers, if we could, as a community, do something to prevent an apartment building being put up on our lake, because once they have, the reason they can't put up an apartment building is because of the septic. But once they have sewage, somebody might buy someone's property and put up an apartment building. So can we do, a homeowners association can restrict stuff like that, can we?
Zoning.
So yeah, it'd be a zoning issue, and they are currently going through the zoning right now.
The county is.
The county is, and the estimates were what, 2 years to have the rezoning? But we are working very closely with the zoning commission about the land out here, because we do not want to see like big multi-unit condos and that type of stuff going in, which sewer septic would open up for the sewer system. So that would have to be codified from the zoning board. And we have mentioned that we do not want to.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Jay Winkelbach, District 1. I saw yesterday in one of the Facebook groups regarding Lake Lemon that they had an issue with parking their boats, or the docking area over their office torn up pretty badly. Is that a problem over there that's building out, or is it just going to be one area there?
That's the first that I've heard about that. We regularly have pontoon boats and boats parked there throughout the weekend. We do monitor it for riprap in case kids throw a rock out there or something. We'll go and get that. So I have not heard about it being a continuous or issue or frequently happening. I did get a call about that as well, and I think it's kind of a one-off.
Yes, sir.
Every time I park over there, I have to throw riprap out of it. And I'll walk around in there every time. There's rocks in there, so it's not one time. There's several.
Well, I think that the prop issue, and thank you for helping to get rid of the riprap.
Yes, sir.
David Lemon, has there ever been any, speaking of Shelton Creek, Google area there, has there ever been any talk of cleaning that up? And is it part of the conservancy?
What do you mean by cleaning that up?
Well, it's just full of trash, especially when the water goes in. A lot of tubes, besides the these ponds, there are a lot of tires and It's just, so,
That has not been discussed before, so.
I know your pipes that you had across the inlet there, they're on the way in, but they're in along the shores or something.
Those are, thank you.
Sure. Just a thought.
Last call for public comments. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda, approval of minutes from the May 25th, 2023 board meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, treasurer's report. Debbie.
Okay, in the board packet, you've got the financials for May 31st, 2023. Quickly hitting the balance sheet, we have almost 1.2 million in checking and savings. Of that, $358,000 is left in the construction account. That's what's left of the bond money. Fixed assets are $850,000, which aren't really worth $850,000. Overall assets, $2 million. Our bonds payable are sitting at $1,065,000. We actually made a payment just recently. Overall equity, about $900,000. If you look at the actual performance in May, we had significant sales of watercraft permits, which would be anticipated at $56,000. So year to date, we're at $86,000. We also had really record amount of park admission fees of $12,000, over $12,000. The weather was kind to us, and that's a huge factor. In terms of the expense side, biggest expenses, $20,000 plus for the lakeweed treatment, $46,000 for the sediment mitigation, and the bond repayment at $36,700. So overall, for the month of May, we had a loss of $58,000, even though everybody paid their taxes in May. We don't get the money until usually June, and I think right now we still don't have.
Yeah, Monroe County has been deposited and Brown County hasn't received yet.
Okay. I think what's interesting to look at, I always compare where are we year-to-date this year versus year-to-date last year. And if you look at the total income, we've got $180,000 year-to-date this year. We only had $133,000 year-to-date last year. Significant increase in watercraft permits by $16,000. Our park reservations, good job to the staff. That's up like $11,000. And we have that other income of almost $12,000, but 10 of that was from the dump truck sale. So those are the highlights on a comparison there. If you look at the expenses, and I just try to touch on the ones that were significant, over $10,000 difference. Number one is the operations supervisor, which we didn't have in place last year. So that's an increased expense. And as I previously mentioned, the lakeweed treatment. Our sediment mitigation, the money we paid out thus far is $132,000 less than what we had paid the year before. And of course, we had the bond repayment. Are there any questions or concerns from the board about the May financials? June will really kind of tell the tale. I mean, it's kind of hard because we're trying to go through a budgeting process when most of our income is coming in the summer months. So, hearing none, I would ask for an approval of the vouchers for May, totaling $135,715.75. I believe I've already mentioned the most significant ones, the payment to Heartland Dredging. We also did have the rental stage for the Boogie event, and, you know, we, bottom line, made income off of that, so that was not lost money.
Do we have a motion for the claims?
Yes.
Second. Moved and second. Any discussion on the claims? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moves on to manager's report. So, Adam.
All right, so it talks about a lot of this. I just want to give a dredging update of where we are currently in the project. So on the map that you see on the front of this is where the areas that have been, the green has been approximate, so we're taking their mapping and then drawing on this. The areas that have been done, when we first started dredging, that little spit of land that was forming was a little bit further west than it was in 2018 and 19 when we first did all this mapping. So that's why we had to start just a little bit of where that initial zone 1 was decided in the conceptual designs. They've currently moved, they being the dredgers, have moved north, and they're gonna work their way back out to the west right now. So we are into zone 2. The one interesting thing that I thought from the zone 1 that we have, and then zone 1 from the conceptual design report back in 2018, was dredging for open water in zone 1. They're approximating 83,732 yards, and we actually had dredged 83,000 prior to shifting to that zone 2. So the accuracy on that was pretty good for that conceptual design report, looking at how much sediment was going to be removed. Again, 83,732 yards removed as of June 22nd. On a cost basis within the contract, $527,000 has been completed in the contract. We did raise that contract by 20% this year, so we can try to keep the same low rates and while they're on the water. So that contract did have a change order to go to a maximum of $1,054,000, and then that's an approximate yardage of 142,000 yards that we can get out under that contract. Again, there is money budgeted for these polymers and flocculants, and if those are not used, that can go towards additional yardage. So that's how I say approximately $142,000. Our all-inclusive yard cost, those would include mobilization and that polymer cost and the total contract for up to that $142,000 is about $7.42, all-inclusive. When we looked back at the estimates from 2018, they were estimating a price of $8 per yard, and then they actually had a contingency of 30%. So they're estimating $684,000 to get to this point, and we've spent $527,000. So we're actually doing quite a bit better on the project side compared to the initial numbers from our conceptual design. So that's pretty good. So we're about $100,000 plus under budget to get to this amount of yardage on the dredging side of it. So I'd like the pretty good aspect from the project side there. In the blue on the map is where the barge is currently sitting, and then they will be moving towards the west to clear that area out. So they're set up now to where they're about halfway through zone 2. Zone 2 total estimates were around 90,000 yards based on the conceptual design report. So with this contract, we'll be into zone 2, approaching the northern part of zone 2 in this, which is kind of where we thought initially based on the yardage estimates. So that's all going very well. It is a little bit slower. I know the dredgers are happy to be headed west again because that sediment does get so compacted and large as you move east there. And we actually got to the point where with their current barge setup, we were into like 0 to 1 inches of water, so we couldn't move barges over to cut further east of where the line is right there. On the back, this is a picture that we took on May 23rd. And again, visually, it changes. The water level fluctuates in there a whole lot. When we're not dredging over the weekend, the water levels are coming down, it's not pumping into it. They come back up with big rains when we're pumping. So what that looks like changes a lot. It's a very dangerous area. The sides are like very wet on the inside and very steep, and that sediment is like quicksand. So please do not go into this area and go out on the water. We do have lots of no trespassing signs, purple paint. I don't know what else we can do to hold off from a liability on our side, but it is a dangerous spot for going out into. So please don't do that. The basin information, upland containment size is 120,000 yards as built. That's the volume to the bottom of the outflow pipe. Now, if we were to hit that 120,000 yards, essentially what you would see is a stream going directly from the inflow across to the outflow. So we can't do that because it would be passing through there. So it's really going to be based on the functional capacity of the sites. We are monitoring for our total suspended solids and turbidity, so we can make best estimated guess at the time to approach before we start having any negative impacts where the return water is coming out. Over 83,000 yards have been placed in that basin. I mean, so that's over 2/3 of the actual capacity. Again, I think if we get 100,000 yards, then it's going to be kind of approaching that final point. The dredge material location will shift once the outflow parameters are deemed unacceptable, and this is going to be in conjunction with the regulatory agency, so we don't get accused of being flippant with it. It'll all be very kosher and with them, so we can come back and say everybody's in the loop, and that way we're not fighting additional interests one way or the other. And then, so again, working with the permitting agencies, how the yardage is removed is verified. This is a question that we get a lot. So we do a bathymetric survey, similar to like the fishing maps that we have that show the depth. They do a bathymetric survey for the areas prior to dredging. There's a sonar on the actual dredge, and then after they dredge, they come back and do another bathymetric survey, where essentially they're pinging sonar off the ground. They can see where the sediment level is at. That pre and post survey information is sent off to Christopher Burke Engineering. We don't verify this. They plug that pre and post data in, and they can see the actual yardage that was removed. So Heartland Dredging applies for a pay application. I think we just paid pay application 10 on the project. They apply for that. We send that pay application to Christopher Burke Engineering. Heartland Dredging sends their pre and post bathymetric data, and then they verify it and send a letter of recommendation for payment. That's reviewed by Debbie, myself, and then signed off by both of us as well. And that is done monthly, so rather than trying to do full years of work and you have sediment coming in as well, so it can change a lot, is do that monthly for the pay application so it can be as accurate as possible.
Just where they dredged that month?
Correct, yeah.
They don't go back to the west?
For the pay application, it's where they dredge that area. And so when they're looking at the yardage removed, they say it's for that specific area for the pay application.
But will they do a end result?
Yes, yeah, and that's actually going to be a critical component moving forward. We've always said, this is kind of the first run, see how this works, how this is going to go. It's essentially the first time that we've done it. So one of the things that we will have to do, this is a very good question, moving forward is doing annual surveys in that entire bay so we can see how quickly the sediment is coming back in and to fill it up. And that ultimately is going to be what dictates cost amounts, frequency of dredging amounts. I mean, really, it's all best guesstimates until we kind of see how much is coming in and what it's actually going to take to combat that. On our sediment transport studies that was done 3 years ago or so, they were estimating a little over 40,000 yards of sediment were settling out annually just in that eastern bay. Now the rate of settling really kind of is dictated by the flow and then the depth. So as we move this deep water further east, that sediment's going to start falling out faster, hopefully consolidate in the areas instead of continuing to push out further and further into the delta. So we will have to do a post-bathymetric survey, and we are going to have to do bathymetric surveys each year to see how long it's taking to fill in, how effective this was, and ultimately what costs are going to be, because the dredging out here is going to be continuous. It's never going to not be a sediment issue. So these numbers are huge numbers to help us on that. So that's how we verify it. So it's not us in the office, it's the engineers verifying the data that's taken from the hydraulic dredgers. And that's how we know how much has been placed in the disposal basin. That's where it's going to right now. I did want to give an update for the private dredging that was on the lake. McCulloch Dredging moved almost 4,800 yards of sediment when they were on the lake. 49 large barge loads and 15 of the small barges they couldn't get into. I do know they are working, McCulloch Dredging is in on a big project in Ohio currently, so I do believe they are done at least for the current part of the season right now with the dredging. I think there was enough interest and it went smoothly enough that I believe they're interested in starting to help do this on maybe every other year basis or come back, let a few projects build up and then come back. So their efficiency level was very nice for the amount of time that they were on the lake. It seems like most people that are dealing with it did a pretty good job. They also got down 16 triaxles of riprap along shorelines for stabilization that were paid for by the private partners. So again, we're into zone 2 now, heading west from where they're at. We are getting some more marker buoys out there. When you're heading east, if you're going into the creek channels, stay within the red buoys right off the tip of Ellis Point to that mark that channel. When you get north of those buoys, you go from 5.5 feet to 1 inch of water like a wall. It is a media. Any questions from the board regarding?
Zone 1, it looks like it's indicated that you're not going to the maintenance line.
I think they may be a little bit further than this, but they're not to the maintenance line yet. It's gotten to the point where with the current barge setup, they can't move. You can't get the barges onto that zero sum area. So when we look at eventual dredging projects for next year, that's something we're gonna have to take into consideration is equipment type to get to these areas that you can't necessarily reach with the current setup.
Okay, so I know Carol Gentry sent you an email requesting Salmon Harbor residents in District 7 to contribute to hydraulically dredge the area south of Section 1. I estimate it to be about not more than 3,000 cubic yards. So $20,000 divided by $6 a cubic yard is roughly 3,000 cubic yards. I would ask the board to allow Salmon Harbor residents to contribute to the LLCD $20,000 so that they can pay Heartland Dredging to come in and go south of Section 1 so that we can maintain access from our channel out to the lake.
And ultimately, that would have to be a decision on the board. I don't think 3,000 yards is very much in the grand scheme of things. But the biggest thing that I want to look at is to make sure that they can complete our contract for this year. And then if there were to be additional time, then put it to the board for that. It's not a whole lot in yardage. So that would just be my thing is, making sure that we can finish our contract for that. Yeah. And then I did meet with Carol Gentry, a couple other residents down there, and we talked about if they were to remove some areas where that would be. I did kind of recommend against removing all of that sediment because you don't want to make it so the creek is flowing down and then actually going right into that east side of Ellis Point. So we did talk about kind of leaving a barrier wall if they were to do that on the eastern portion to help protect that. But that my biggest thing is be making sure we can get our contract done.
And this would be a separate contract, correct? So we're not, we
Correct,
can't
yeah.
do a change
Yeah.
order to because we've already maximized the change order for the existing.
Correct. I think the
But-
cleanest, if it were to happen, I think the cleanest would be if you had that money just paid directly to Heartland Dredging.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you yourself even said McCulloch's drafting 5 feet. Well, none of our barges have ever drafted more than 4 feet. So he has created a spot which the hydraulic dredger would take care of at the end of this season. We're now kind of going around it, but it's just to the east of Ellis Point and south of Ellis Point. There's a bump, and his barge has created a shelf in there because he drafts more than anything that we've ever drafted in any of our large or small barges. But I appreciate the board, if I'm understanding or seeing your faces, and do you think I need a motion for that? Or? I would make that motion if necessary.
I think it's appropriate to have it recorded.
I just have one question, and I think you sort of alluded to the fact that we have one concern about let's get our dredging done first. Is there any other negative? It sounds like you guys are going to generate enough money to pay for the dredging, and you're willing to wait until they can do it. And why would we not
I mean, we've had other board members approach us about digging in their areas too, but on a cost share basis. And so I think with the level of yardage, which is pretty minimal at 3,000, and we're on a 140,000 yard contract, so they're paying 100% of that. I mean, I think it would be similar to somebody else paying McCall to come in and do private work.
You probably need to talk to Heartland about it, you know, because I think they're kind of south on our contract. I mean, they're not doing great on it. You know, they might be ready to get the heck off of it.
Yeah, so this wouldn't cost the LLCD then anything.
And that's why I don't really
Well,
have
the
qualms
other,
about it.
I think the other thing you need to consider, and I'm generally supportive of it, Mike, but the other thing is then, what about like District 6? And they're like, okay, well, come on up here because Malcolm has raised that issue. Well, we can raise this much money, and then the cost is to spend, I mean, what he can raise. I'm just worried we're gonna kind of, everybody's gonna go, well, stick those pumps over here and there, and what really is the cost?
Well, if it's
Kind of
private, I
careful what
mean, what about McCullough? I mean, would they be interested? You know?
Well, here's what I'll tell you about McCulloch. McCulloch would charge $45 a cubic yard, and if we can get it for $6 or $8 a cubic yard, we'd take the 6 or 8. You know, and I'll
It'd be
tell
more
you,
efficient.
our entire district, if this 20,000 is approved, that would be almost $100,000 that District 7 has put into this lake. 2 weirs, a half a dozen cleanouts on both weirs. We've done 3 or more private dredgings that we can show the board. We've put $80,000 into this lake. This would be a total of $100,000 that the entire district has put into this lake by putting prevention in and digging it out. We're just trying to save the portion of the lake that we use the most, and I would appreciate the motion that Adam said. It would be towards the end of the year. He will talk to Heartland Dredging. He will get approval. We will pay Heartland Dredging. We just want the board approved because we would be using our disposal site to dispose of material. That's the motion.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and second. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. And one of the things this also does is this is sedimentation removal that your district, your sub-area is paying, that the entire district is not paying. So it saves tax dollars.
Right. The only impact on us is using our disposal stuff.
That is it.
And that's a pretty minimal.
Which is,
You'll pump that out in a week.
What do you guys think the timing will be on that? Would it be like the end of the summer then, or what, when you say
It would
complete our
have,
contract?
I wanted to
It's
complete
gonna
our
go into-
contract.
But it's gonna go into next summer, is it not?
Our current contract should be done this year. That's what we're shooting for, is
What
to
month?
bid out. I mean, it's gonna be October, November, but that amount would be pretty quick for the,
It seems like it's so close to where we, the whole zone 1 anyway.
yeah.
So vegetation control.
Yeah, vegetation control, yeah.
So we're gonna come down.
Let me get through this real quick and then
The
we'll
maintenance line here,
Okay.
get some picnic going on.
See, it's already 3 foot, 6 foot here.
We've treated milfoil already once this year. We did a vegetation survey, I think it was last Thursday. I went out and there really hasn't been any more growth around since that first survey. And a lot of that is we just haven't had much rain. I think early on, like there's already lots of plankton in the lake for this early in the year. So if we were to get a couple of good rains, I'd be very happy with that. So we're gonna do a full vegetation survey. There wasn't enough yet to kind of call it and actually do a treatment of any sort. Usually we will treat the lotus and emergent vegetation in like late July, early August, once the lotus actually comes up. It has to be actually leafed out to treat that emergent. So we will continue to keep an eye on that. And then finally, the fireworks update. We are doing fireworks on Monday, July 3rd, with a rain date of Friday, July 7th. If you are going by boat, they are still gonna do some of those water cakes, so make sure to stay a couple 100 yards off of the point in this area. If you're coming by, we actually raised the fee this year. We used to make probably 4,000 to 6,000 donations from the gate when we do donation only for the fireworks. Last year we charged $20 per vehicle, and we made 12, I think it was like 10 to 12,000. And we were at capacity to the point where the sheriff's helping us out, said we need to lower capacity. So we're raising that up to $25, and if we were to lose 25% of the cars, make the same amount of money, I'll deem that a great success. We will have some food trucks out here, but similar to that we did last year. I think we had Philly's Party Tacos, Kona Ice, and a barbecue truck will be set up here. So you can't stop by boats and pick that up. I'm assuming most people will be here by boat. We are going to have, as with every year, the beach parking will be closed that year. We will allow people at the beach until about 4 o'clock-ish, and then we clear everybody out as we get closer to the fireworks time, since it's kind of all the fallout area. It should be a good show this year, and we've ordered up some nice weather, so it should be good.
The other thing that you guys might be interested in is just your thought process now about this whole Eclipse thing. Just kind of, that's kind of exciting.
So we are in the planning phases now of doing an Eclipse event out here. I don't know who's been paying attention to that. We are in a direct path of totality. I think it's like 4 minutes of Eclipse. We're directly in the middle. So we have been looking at what kind of other areas are doing, and we're setting up a meeting with the board officers to kind of go over a game plan. I think there's pretty substantial money to be made, and I think what we're going to propose to staff is to allow camping out in this open field area, and then RV parking on the point, so we can fit probably 15 large RVs in the middle and small ones along the side. So we're estimating close to 300 camping sites, and then up to, I guess it's like 35 to 40 RV sites. And what people are charging for these are pretty crazy. Hotels are already charging like $600 to $700 in town a night. So we think we could probably charge, in the $300 range and allow them to camp the day before and the day after. So we're gonna keep playing that out, trying to, it's like
3-day minimum.
3-day minimum, yeah. So we're looking at a 2-day minimum at least. But so we're in the planning stages of that now to have like an event. We're talking with IU about getting musicians. We've been talking to some of the observatories to see if we can have like some events going on, but kind of do at least a 2-day camping event here with some activities go on.
But the
I see Jess speaking in the window. She's been doing all the work on that, and we've kind of got a landing site going on as well to gauge interest. But I think it'll be a pretty major revenue generator.
But the zone of totality, it like occurs in the middle of the afternoon, correct?
Yeah.
Like
I think it
2 o'clock,
starts,
1:40.
the encroachment or whatever starts at like 2, and then the totality's like around 3, and then it's like another hour where it's
I just wondered about the desire of people to camp versus just drive out here and see it.
I
You
think
know what I'm
people will
saying?
come from far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the DNR was at my property, they said they're already all booked up with people from China on all of their property.
What?
City of Bloomington's estimating like millions coming to town.
Well, we have to capitalize on this. It'll help us with our budget.
So Nick,
All right, let me cover this finger dock thing.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay, so on the finger dock, you might remember we discussed it a little bit last time. We drew pictures yeah, but basically the current city ordinance says finger docks, T's or L's may be used to provide mooring slips or to stabilize the dock. Finger docks may not exceed 20 feet in length. Okay, so the thought is that, this was written when boats were smaller and so on, and, folks would benefit from having a longer finger dock so they could, adequately reach the covers on their boats and all that kind of stuff. And so the holdup right now is we're waiting to hear back from the city, but I propose or would like to make a motion that we do vote on this to at least be able to tell the city that, hey, we're already agreed upon this. we would just like an answer.
So is your motion to go like from 20 feet to 30 feet, or what's the sense of the motion?
I would recommend 30 feet because that's our total maximum vessel length.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to have a limit. We
Okay,
can't
and
have
let
50
me
or
check
60.
the proponents, you guys good with 30 feet, okay?
Okay.
So what I would suggest is the proposed motion be that the LLCD Board of Directors recommends that the city of Bloomington amend the existing ordinance to increase the length of finger docks to 30 feet.
From 20 to 30.
So moved.
Okay.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Noise curtain?
So we've got the price, and we're now into the decibels, and the decibels are right around 50 or 60, which was kind of saying it's an average of a quiet neighborhood in that area.
So what's happened is the vegetation's grown up since the initial complaint, and right now it's better. But what I've asked is that they continue to monitor it closely, and then also understand that where this might move, because we want to make sure that if it continues once the vegetation's gone, that we're addressing it properly. So we're close.
And I did talk with Hengefeld, and she said the issue now isn't so much the loudness of it, it's the consistency of it. And I assured her that within the next couple months that it should be moving away. So what we're looking is with Heartland Dredging, I'm trying to get an answer if they're going to keep that booster pump
They're working
on
it
the
now.
barge, are they?
Yeah.
Not as them. I'm wondering if they're going to ask if they're going to keep that booster pump on the small barge once they start utilizing the other site, and if so, we'll pull the trigger on those curtains if they're going to keep using it. So if they're going to get rid of it after this next month period, it's kind of a moot point. But if we're going to continue to use it, then that will be purchased.
Motion to adjourn. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Next meeting is July 27th, 2023, 6 p.m. at City of Bloomington Utilities Building. Of course, we do have the picnic afterwards, so everyone's welcome to enjoy that. And I heard a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. It's been moved and second. Barring any objection, we stand adjourned.
Yeah, there's Chip